Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session about the future of the global water governance. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome our first keynote speaker, which is Mrs. Maaike van Ginneken from the water envoy from the Kingdom of the Netherlands to talk to us about the perspectives after the UN Water Conference of 2023. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and nice to see all waterfronts here, although it's hard to see you in the back, so feel free to... Hi! But you can also come down a little bit, but I have part of my terms of reference today is very easy and part is very difficult. And I thought I'll do the easy part and I outsource the difficult part to our collective wisdom. But let me try. 2020 UN Water Conference, first water conference under the UN flag in 46 years. We focused on an inclusive process, we focused on being cross-sectoral, and we focused on being action-oriented. So let me first grade ourselves a little bit, how well did we do? I think, and somebody's going to stand up, no, it wasn't inclusive. I think we did okay on inclusiveness, no? I mean, in the UN system, most of the discussions are with member states, and we try to bring in civil society, businesses, universities, young people, women, men, everybody. So lots of room for improvement, but I think, we passed. Second, cross-sectoriality. I'm not sure we got a pass on that, and I'll come back to that in the forward-looking part, because, I love coming to Stockholm, because it's like an old jacket you put on, all your water friends, family, reunion, etc. But most people who manage water are not in the water sector. The water sector probably isn't even a water sector. And how do we really bring in everybody? Big question going forward. And the third principle, the Republic of Kazakhstan and the Kingdom of the Netherlands and co-host of the 2023 conference agreed upon, was action orientation. And there I give ourselves not an A+, but a good grade. Because I think what we did in the conference is we asked everybody to commit to actions. Over 800 commitments to take action in your country, in your basin, on water. And that together formed the Water Action Agenda. And if you look back 18 months later, that Water Action Agenda is in full swing. It's really being implemented, right? At the farm level, at the basin level, at the subnational level, at the city level, at the national level. So I think the first UN Water Conference in 46 years actually triggered action at different levels. Is it sufficient? No. We know, we were in New York in July. We know that not only on SDG 6, but on all SDGs, because water is important for all SDGs. We're not on track for the 2030 goals. We know that in climate change, we're starting to bend the trend on CO2 emissions. The impacts of lower CO2 scenarios actually are much bigger than we knew. So adaptation and water resources management, making water the engine of climate adaptation, is more urgent than ever. So we need to speed up and we need to scale up. But hey, it was one conference. Let's give ourselves a break. We started with the Water Action Agenda well. So inclusive, cross-sectoral, and action-oriented. The question today is about global water governance, and we don't really have global water governance, and I think the real question is, do we need global water governance, or what do we need? In the Netherlands, and I think for some other people as well, we're just coming out of the post-2023 UN Water Conference dip. No, everybody who worked on international water in the Netherlands worked only on that conference, and it took us a bit of time to recover, to follow up on the Water Action Agenda, etc. And we're really thinking, where do we want to go? And I think that's actually a collective thinking process, and it's great we're in one room here with smart people to do that collective thinking process. And I think for me the main question is, do we stay in our water bubble and invest in global water governance? Or do we say, look, we're all water ambassadors and let's go to the agriculture sector and let's go to the urban sector and let's go to the biodiversity, etc. And I think we're all a little bit schizophrenic about that, including myself, so that's why I said this is the hard part of this speech and I want to put it back to all of you. Because I think that's really the question. And look, we will come back to Stockholm every August and feel that warm feeling of being at a water reunion. I'm sure Siwi and the government of Sweden will make sure that continues to happen. We will have a 2026 UN Water Conference, and Senegal and the United Arab Emirates are doing that, and it will be a very different conference, because it's not the first one in 46 years, it's the second one, no? And I've always learned how to count 1, 2, multiple. So this is the 2, and after that, hopefully it becomes regular. We will have a One Water Summit, we will have all kinds of things for the water family. But are we going to put more emphasis on that, more processes, or do we say, good, we come together once in a while for a family reunion, but for the rest, we all become water ambassadors, water envoys to all these other sectors? One question is, but then what's the hook? What's the home? You know, if you don't have your family, you feel a little bit homeless, no? I get a lot of discussion here, and it's also something we're thinking about, the 3 COP processes, no? Rio COP, COP Climate, COP Biodiversity, COP decertification. Is that the hook that we can put our water agenda on? These are existing processes that work, where member states, countries, governments negotiate the direction we want to go into. In the current geopolitical setting, you can say that you want a COP on water, but maybe I'm a little bit risk averse, but I think that could be a lot of effort without getting to a conclusion. So I think, the COP climate for me is the most obvious one, no? And I think we have got in some way, no? Minister Hani Saliwan from Egypt this morning reminded me that it was 5 times in the COP28 declaration water was mentioned. Then in Dubai, there's a little bit more. We're now working with the Azeris to see how we can work, and Brazil is the big one because there will be so much adaptation on the agenda. Biodiversity, I think we're, as a water sector, flirting a little bit with them. I think we don't really know how to put that, and are we too much in the green space, because water is such a nice topic that you also have more economic sectors, and the World Urban Forum, the COPs. So for me that's a question, and I don't have the answer to that question, but I think that's the question that we can address today. And from the Netherlands, we're very happy to work with all of you, and maybe not with all of you at the same time, but with a small group it's probably a little bit easier to have a productive discussion, to actually think this through, and to actually think where we're going forward. We are very happy that the UN is making progress on water, the system-wide strategy on water and sanitation. Rumor has it I have a little friend, UN water envoy, very soon. I've heard this rumor before, but let's hope that that happens fast and she will be in place rapidly. That will continue. A lot of the water efforts will continue, but if we do a delta, if we do an extra, a little bit of additional free energy, and we stick together, are we going to invest that in water governance and in what already exists? Are we going to reach out to other sectors and invest in that? Or do we need to start something anew? It's a presentation with many question marks. Looking forward to hear the answer from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to hear you say that the biodiversity world and the water world are floating together, especially as I am from the French Biodiversity Agency. My name is Andrea Ferret, and I will be your moderator today. So without waiting more, I call on stage the panelists of this session. First, we have Claudette Brière-Spiteri from IW Learn, where she is a project manager. Claudette, please, you can come on stage and sit down. And we can clap for her, I think. We also welcome Mr. Federico Proversi from UN Water, where he is Chief Technical Advisor. Welcome, Federico. And finally, Mr. Bruno Piguet from the US EPA and from the Office of Water at the EPA. Welcome. So we have this studied panel today, and I want to start first with a question to Federico. Federico, welcome. So we know already that UN Water was, yes, Mike's over there. UN Water was a key actor in the UN Water Conference, obviously, and among which, the successes among which are the Water Action Agenda. So I wanted to ask you, for you, what changed after this UN conference, and what initiative or program are you the most, the proudest of?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Andrea. First of all, UN Water is not an organization. We are a coordination mechanism in the UN system with 36 UN agencies working together. So when you say UN Water, when we say UN Water supporting the UN 23 Water Conference, really means the whole UN system behind this. What changed? Well, everything changed and nothing changed, right? So to the billions of people who still lack access to, basic water, sanitation, hygiene, in this very short period of time, of course, between March last year and today, I'm sure very little has changed, unfortunately. And as Mike was hinting at, of course, the world is entering into a global geopolitical phase, which makes multilateralism quite challenging and difficult. But at the same time, everything has changed. Like we're at Stockholm World Water Week. For those of you, and there are many here who have been here for many, many years, you may remember many years ago when we were really talking about, we need water more high up on the political agenda. We don't even have IWRM in the MDGs, and now with the 2030 agenda that blossomed, bloomed, and now with the conference last year, there is this momentum, this political momentum, which is still with us. And the Water Action Agenda, for me, really captures the collective ambition of the water community to really be there, to contribute to the Sustainable Development Agenda, and to reduce inequalities. It's great. So what needs to be done? I think last year the member states at the General Assembly adopted a milestone resolution establishing 2 more conferences in 26 and then in 28. We know that. For the UN itself internally, the milestone was asking the system to actually produce a UN system-wide strategy for water and sanitation. What is that? When there is one topic, one issue, where you have many parts of the UN system working on it, then at times the system develops these strategies or common approaches. There is one, for example, on pollution, one on gender, and one on disability. And now we have one on water and sanitation. It is important because it never happened before in 78 years of the UN. So for us, it's a great opportunity to really do more, respond to the ambition of the conference, but also work better together. This is really it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Claudette, I know we put a lot of emphasis during the conference on greater collaboration to achieve the SDGs and especially SDG 6. collaboration at all levels and collaboration also across borders. So can you tell us more about what you are doing and what you're working on to contribute to better transboundary water management at your level?
Yeah, hello and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being there, and thanks for inviting us, Jeff and IW Learn, to be here. Indeed, the issue of collaboration, cooperation was at the core of the UN Water Conference, and that was also the multi-sectorial. We already heard one of the three key points aspects: collaboration with scientific collaboration, as well as this the need for international and transboundary cooperation. I'm pretty sure everybody heard these days, especially in line with also with the theme of the event this year, bridging borders, why transboundary cooperation is very important. We know, most freshwater sources, they are shared, and a large amount of this world's resources, it's in transboundary aquifers. Therefore, when we talk about integrated water resource management, we cannot talk about or focus on what is needed for collaboration. And indeed, also one of the interactive dialogues for those who were there last year and who that remember was on water for cooperation. And here I think it's interesting, at least for me, to bring out this nuance for. It was not water cooperation, but very much for cooperation. So viewing water in the lens of being a driver and an agent for stimulating cooperation and ultimately peace. So with that, let's say, backdrop linking to the UN Water Conference, and I mean, I don't need to dwell so much more on let's say the multiple facets that comes with this cooperation. We've heard a lot. I've been in sessions these days on what is needed, the ingredients to make it happen, sustainable funding and financing, stakeholder engagement, political will, etc., etc. I think this is very much the bigger picture. So to get to your question, how is Jeff and in particular IW Learn, that's basically from my perspective, my daily work, contributing to this bigger, let's say, ambition of transboundary cooperation and transboundary water management. So probably most of you know in the room that Jeff, so that's the Global Environment Facility, is the largest grant funding mechanism for multi-country collaboration when it comes to shared freshwater. So we talk about shared river basins, shared aquifers, and as well as shared marine systems, so anything that is shared. And over the years, there have been a lot of, it's been a big financing mechanism in 60 rivers and 14 aquifers and 16 lakes, so always in transboundary setting. And the investments are reaching currently around 1 billion. So a number of, let's say, projects and initiatives to tap on and partnerships. And in addition to what I called ingredients, enabling factors for transboundary cooperation, what Jeff and this international waters area also bring in is the importance of the knowledge management aspect. So a lot of knowledge, of data knowledge is being produced at this level, and this needs to kind of go one level higher and shared at least with all these projects, what we call the portfolio and beyond, because it's very much a very big international partnership. The second aspect of capacity building, this is very much what we also deal with at IW Learn, and the partnership building, what I already said. You can move on to the next slide, because that's basically in a nutshell what we deal with. So very much focusing on these three key, let's say, enabling factors. Just to give us a few examples, so it's very much providing or helping through the project the development of specific tools, of the hubs, what we call hubs, so a platform where people can go to for different knowledge products. Of course, trainings and courses and trainings, they come with that. And again, this element of networking, but also going beyond the partnership building. So conferences targeting transboundary water cooperation and other events. So that's essentially where we come in. It was a more introduction, the link to the UN Water Conference, and especially from this lens of how we support that.
Thank you. So really knowledge sharing, building and developing capacity and building partnerships is really one of the three main points. Thank you. I want to now move on to our guest from the EPA, because we've seen the way from the UN system, we've seen the way from international organizations, and I would like now to do a focus on what member states can do at their level. So can you tell us more about the EPA commitments, both at the national and the international level?
Absolutely happy to. I just want to say first, though, what a great keynote, asking a really provocative and good question. Do we really need water governance? And Federico, I want to say thank you for your comment about how everything has changed and nothing has changed all at the same time. Both really provocative and great statements, and I think they both reflect the state that we're in today. And I want to first say that it may seem somewhat presumptuous of me from the United States to presume that somehow I understand the challenges of water around the world. And so I want to acknowledge that I may not know the challenges of water around the world, and say that up front. I also want to say that I do think it's valuable to share the experiences that we do have in the hope that it adds to the global conversation and adds to meaning and provides some added depth and understanding of the common challenges we have. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, I wanted to say that, at the opening session that we all sat in, Henk Ovink from the Netherlands said something that I remembered very quite clearly. He said that in the United States, Kamala Harris brought water into the White House. And it is certainly true that President Biden and Vice President Harris have made water central to their administration, both domestically and internationally. And that's why EPA and the United States participated in the 2023 Water Conference and provided because it provided an essential platform to have a global discussion about our common water challenges. And since the conclusion of that conference, we've seen the issue continue to be elevated. We still continue to have the same kind of issues we had before, but the issue is certainly elevated. It is, in some respects, water's moment. But because it's our moment, it means there's so much more work to do. We have to continue with the science. We've got to work, as you mentioned, across borders. We've got to engage with indigenous communities and the youth, build binding commitments, robust regulatory frameworks, figure out how to finance all of these issues. And then, as our keynoter asked, talk about global governance. Our keynoter asked us to consider whether it's necessary. I want to ask, what is global governance? And I want to give a simple definition, which may or may not be accurate, but as I struggled to think through it, I thought, okay, well, maybe this could be one definition of global governance. That is the development of norms, principles, rules, incentives, education, and some sort of framework that changes behavior and promotes water distribution for all. And the for all part is critical. I think those elements of the definition for water governance could include data, clearly leadership, coordination, funding, recognizing and including the role of NGOs, provision of technical assistance, or one might say knowledge transfer, and empowering communities at the local level. There was an author, his name was Charles Fishman. He wrote a book called I can't remember the name of the book, but one of the things he posited is all water issues are local issues. They are local issues, but sometimes they require a globe of people to help tackle them. And the area of water governance that I'll focus on really for the sake of time is local conditions and context, and I believe it's a key role in successful water governance. In the US, it plays out really starkly. I mean, for the vast majority of people in the United States, water is considered just an average everyday thing. You turn on the tap, it's clean and safe, you take it for granted. But there are many communities in the United States where our one-size-fits-all system just does not work, and it's failed. Estimated 2 million people in the United States lack basic running water and indoor plumbing in their homes, and many more live in communities around the country with inadequate or aging infrastructure that has either failed or is on the point of failure. And frankly, we consider it in the Biden-Harris administration unacceptable. So we were faced with a stark question: what do we do about it? And fortunately, Congress passed a bipartisan infrastructure law, which provided $50 billion in funding around the United States to help fund water infrastructure projects. And that's great, but it's not enough. Money doesn't solve just all of the problems. We also understood that if we were to tackle these issues amongst those 2 million people, we had to do more. We had to focus on ambitious technical assistance. And so we started an ambitious technical assistance program that we hope changes the odds for communities. And I'm really proud of the work we're doing in the technical assistance realm. And I would also consider it a knowledge transfer realm. The ethos is simple. Show up, go to those communities, roll up our sleeves, listen to the communities, and then work together to determine what kind of solution should be put in place to tackle the problems that people are facing. And that is not a fast process. It takes time, it takes listening, it takes addressing very complex challenges in a way that help develop holistic, sustainable solutions. And boy, while those words trip right off the tongue, the effort to deliver that, to be sustainable and holistic, is no easy task. We are working at US EPA to support 2,000 communities around the country and tribes and territories with addressing drinking water infrastructure needs, stormwater infrastructure needs, and wastewater infrastructure needs. We've invested $500 million to ensure that we provide that kind of technical assistance. And that's not a website. It's not just a person on a phone. It's going out into the communities, spending time with the communities, working with those communities to make a difference that we all determine, not just the experts, the quote experts, but the experts in the community as well. And it's not just something we're working on at home amongst our communities. It's also built into the White House action plan on global water security that President Biden and Vice President Harris announced in 2022. We believe this effort, which will invest $5 billion to help ensure equitable access to water and sanitation infrastructure globally, could make a difference. And technical assistance and knowledge transfer is central to this whole of government approach under the U.S. Global Water Strategy, which includes USAID's efforts to help 22 million people access safe drinking water and 22 million people access proper sanitation services. We found that engaging, and boy, this is no secret to many people here because it's something I've heard over and over again, the importance of engaging people at the local level will be the real way to make a difference. And we believe at EPA, whether it's working domestically within our own country or internationally, that that's important if we're going to develop holistic solutions. I will say also it means developing the workforce within the community to ensure that they can provide that holistic service that maintains those services that are so important. I also want to say the effort for technical assistance that we've been engaged in doesn't posit a specific answer to any community's issues or questions. It allows a conversation that helps to ensure that the community comes up with the answer hand in hand with our agency. So that's what we're doing, and I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hear a lot of things in what you say that echo what we have heard already in the keynote speech, but also in other sessions, which is about, water governance has to be for all. And it sort of echoes also the UN, leave no one behind motto. And you have to make sure that you listen to the local concerns, and you come in ready to provide technical assistance, and you come in ready to provide, those investments that are so sorely needed. But you also have to integrate what has been said to you. Otherwise, you're risking to be far off base and not being actually useful. So on that theme of integration, I wanted to ask you, Claude Spiteri, we talk a lot about integration between, different levels, different scales, integration between sectors. What are, to you, the challenges to integration that you have identified, and how can we overcome them? And this question also, if another of our panelists has some insights, I think we can start a discussion on what are the challenges today of integration.
Yeah, thanks. And also thanks to you, because I think you mentioned a number of things that I could easily link to. So integration, I think holistic approach, whole of system, whole of government, whole of society, systematic. I think, yeah, we've heard this. So in preparation, I mean, I was in New York last year, but I went back to the summary proceeding to refresh, like, and yeah, one thing that definitely I noted is like these words keep coming back, and of course, integration is a big word. We integrate across sectors, as we heard. We integrate through multiple stakeholders, but we also integrate through different scales, and that's a lot of integration. So just to bring this discussion maybe one level or a few levels deeper, more at the operational level, what does it mean in projects, for instance? What does it mean when we say we have an integrated project? So to link to my introduction, so a number of these JAF projects in the IW, in the transboundary systems, they adopt or they implement integrated approaches. So, for instance, integrated what we call conjunctive water management of surface water and groundwater. So, looking at it collectively, integrated approaches like nexus approaches, right? You look at water, food, energy, and ecosystems. Also integrations in terms of source to sea. So we hear a lot about that. So integrating upstream and downstream. So integration, I think you can unpack that in many ways, and there's a lot to it. So yeah, when let's say going from big words, inspirational and aspirational words that come out from big global conferences to more, let's say, on the ground implementation. At least some of my own reflections. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't work on a specific project, but I work across projects. And that's, I think, very much an interesting way to collect, let's say, outcomes, but also challenges that usually are common challenges across different projects in different regions. So, for instance, so drawing from some real projects that are ongoing at this very moment. For instance, projects in South America, like the Guarani Aquifer project in the Niger Basin and the Itas Aquifer. We have also the Nile. We have many other projects. And as part of this knowledge exchange, what I referred to in the beginning, we have this dialogue so that the different projects share what the challenges, and specifically here on integration. For me, the first point that I draw is very much data. And I think we're getting tired of hearing about that. Data and tools, I think we heard a lot also these days here. I think we can debate, is there enough data? Is data not enough? Do we need more data? I think this varies very much from region to region, but I think if we really want to integrate in a very holistic way, we definitely need ground truthing data, and therefore that's where I think data is more limited than available. It's because the systems we are looking at, they are complex, physically, etc. So I think the need for data is there. The more we integrate, the bigger the need for data becomes. So going from physical to socioeconomic, etc., then this need becomes even bigger. And here I just take the opportunity. I saw that, as I said, looking at the summary, it was very much highlighted, specifically highlighted the need for data on groundwater, in particular groundwater quality. So this was an outcome, or not an outcome, but was highlighted last year, and it still remains a big issue globally. Okay, let's say data is available, fine, and then I think we take it a step further, and again, in transboundary settings, then it's not so much the availability, but it's more the sharing of data. And what does this imply in terms of a transboundary setting? So this is just one building block towards this real integration. The second point that I see that is coming back, let's say, from different areas, different projects, is the issue of capacities and skills. Very much so, we've talked about that, but more in the context of integration. So if you really want to really integrate and to really have a holistic approach to your management strategy, you really need to bring together different capacities. I mean, if we take an example of, I mentioned the conjunctive water management, surface water and groundwater, you need hydrologists, hydrogeologists, you need engineers, you need sociologists if you want to take the integration all the way. So I think this is important. What we see in some regions, with under what I call the capacity and the skill, it's also the awareness. Like in some region, this integrated approaches maybe are not the first way of thinking on how to address an issue. So, and under capacities, I think we can say we've been busy with capacity building activities for many years now. I think this is a constant need. There are new tools coming up, introduction, and hoping that people pick them up. Then it would also come with training, with capacities. So I think this is very much a constant need. The third point is issue of scale in integration, and you probably will think about physical scale, so going from local, I think, to global. We heard that already, but also here the implications of scale when you go in a transboundary context, what that means beyond the physical system, but politically and institutionally, and regulations, etc. I think it's rather complex, and we see that a lot in many of these regions that try to integrate. So already you're working in a multi-country setting, and on top of that you are trying to integrate different areas. A few more points. I think I kind of linked to this scale and the institutional setups. Let's say, if we would like to tackle integration fully, I think that would also mean that some organizations might need to reconsider their mandate. So taking taking the example again of the conjunctive water management and the role, for instance, of what river basin organization can play in that, some river basin organizations don't have in their mandate the groundwater management. So if we want to go in an integrated way, there are also implications in that way. And finally, I wanted to add with the funding and financing, not to to dwell so much on that, but I think in this aspect, what we need to focus on is very much to highlight what are the potential shared benefits. I think that to build the case for funding and financing is very much to look at the benefits of the integration and to do that in a transboundary context.
Thank you. I think it's very interesting to see that we find a lot of commonalities between what you were saying and what we are saying now about the need to share resources, the need to share knowledge resources, data is so important, and the need to accompany that by capacity building, because if you have the data and no one to analyze it and act on it, it's sort of, is a moot point. And also what you said about integration being such a big word. I think we hear a lot of big words here during the World Water Week. And I think it's interesting to see that when you want to go from big words to big actions, how many problems you face and how many angles you have to consider. So my question for you, Mr. Propalsi, is how are you taking the big words that are in the WASH strategy, the system, UN-wide system strategy for WASH, and putting them into big actions? In other terms, do you have an implementation plan for the WASH strategy?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, building on Claudette's comment, integration at the policy level, basically integration it's what in the strategy itself we call actually mainstreaming, which means we want to bring water and sanitation high up in all relevant intergovernmental policy processes, because we know there is not one overarching, global process for that for water and sanitation. So we know that the only way to achieve policy coherence is actually to be in each and every policy process. So this is for us integration at the policy level, but I'm bringing this up because actually this is a clear example of what we're actually designing in the implementation of the strategy. So the strategy itself is organized around 5 entry points, which are leadership, country level action, mainstreaming, SDG 6 acceleration. And by the way, I'm very happy to see that the 5 accelerators of the global acceleration framework are basically the structure that I think by coincidence have been used. And the 5th one is about accountability. So we are currently working on the implementation plan, on the log frame for the strategy. This will be ready by November. The implementation plan for this first phase will be for 4 years, from 25 to 28. Why 4 years? Why 25, 28? Because that will cover the 2 huge milestones, which are the 2026 conference and then the 2028 conference. It will also capture, we think, the beginning of any possible conversations in New York about a possible post-2030 framework. We don't know what's going to happen, but it will happen. So the whole UN system, the agencies, we're working very hard on this. And so this will be ready by the end of the year, but the most important thing will be the implementation and, of course, the monitoring, the follow-up and review. So this will happen at the technical level twice a year at the UN Water meeting, but also at the leadership level of the UN once a year. So this is, again, it's one new element. So what's new, what changed? The new element internally is that we had managed to elevate this discussion at the level of the leadership, which wasn't the case before. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And so we see, it's sort of weird because it seems like it's water's moment globally. Everyone seems to be talking about water. We're trying to bring water to the climate COPs and the biodiversity COPs, the desertification COP. It seems like the agenda internationally is really sort of getting aware about water issues. So I have a question for you, and at the EPA, US EPA, What opportunities do you see now that the water question is becoming a priority on the international agenda? Opportunities perhaps internationally, of course, but also, at home.
Well, thank you. It's a great question. So I want to take it in two parts. One is kind of a more abstract answer, and then the other is a little more specifics. So one of the things
We love specific.
Yeah, but in our agency and maybe in several government agencies, I don't work in other ones. I couldn't really speak to others, but in our agency, the issues, environmental issues and economic issues, are fairly stovepiped. And what I mean by that, they're separated out, and people work either on water issues, air issues, land issues, and they're separate. And so typically when we think, even internally within our agency, about issues, we sometimes forget that there are real connections among issues that span media, span from water to air to land. And the big one that, of course, I think we all recognize since we work in water is that climate change, while it's seen primarily in our agency as an air pollution issue, is really not just an air pollution issue. And it's unfortunate because of the way we stovepipe issues that, people's heads get stuck into, well, it must be an air issue. And we all know in this crowd, and anyone working on water issues knows that there is, and I think probably outside of it, because of the awareness at the UN, people are starting to understand that climate change isn't just an air issue. It's an issue that is oftentimes felt first and felt most strongly with regard to water. That's why we released in 2022 at EPA a climate adaptation implementation plan, which set out 3 key goals with timelines for each objective. First is an objective to improve the climate resilience of our water infrastructure. The second is to protect the nation's waters from the impact of a changing climate. And the third was advancing the adaptive capacity of water sector. And that's a lot easier than it sounds easier than it is to actually implement. We have communities across the country that are putting in place water infrastructure at the very time that increasing intensity and frequency of rain events may be changing the way they should put in place infrastructure to address those changes. And that's why it's also important to consider soft or green infrastructure solutions in many of the work that we're doing to improve our infrastructure, because they're more flexible, they're more adaptable, and they can adjust to a changing climate. And we believe that those efforts to bring in green infrastructure into what sometimes can be considered a gray infrastructure framework will help improve adaptability around the nation and can be adapted in a variety of climates and places around the world. We're also embracing water as a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and supporting the efforts of water systems to reach net zero. More than a decade ago, East Bay Municipal Utility in Oakland, California began accepting organic waste from food processors, food growers, and livestock producers to better use excess capacity in its anaerobic digester. And they became, as a result, the first facility in North America to reach a net zero. And right down the street from my place in Washington, D.C., our Blue Plains Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant became the first system in North America to employ thermal hydrolysis to create biogases that generate 10 megawatts of electricity, about a third of the plant's energy use. So again, there's a nexus here, and we're excited to see water integrated into the climate agenda, and will support efforts to improve resiliency. The second part of my answer was something that just happened to us a couple days ago. I made a trip to Stockholm University to meet with several professors at Stockholm University to talk about their efforts regarding the Baltic Sea. And as we sat and talked about the challenges in the Baltic with nutrient impairments, it really brought my brain back to what we're dealing with in the United States with the Gulf hypoxic zone that is a result of nutrient loadings from the Mississippi River that come from farming practices. And so we see connections amongst the different countries and the work we're doing that help us understand issues on an abstract level, but also maybe tackle them in terms of specific practices that will help reduce, in this case, nutrient loadings that help to clean up the Baltic Sea. So I think the elevation of the water agenda has opened a door to new creative solutions that may be employed in some places already, but not in others. And I certainly came away with from my discussions with the Stockholm University people thinking there's a lot to learn and we can work together to address what is, I think, maybe one of the foremost issues, and that is nutrient loadings to our water bodies.
Thank you. And, we see again, the theme of integration, breaking the silos, the stovepipes that you are working on, thanks to this rise in awareness about water issues and how it's linked to climate. And also, coming from the biodiversity standpoint, those green solutions and the nature-based solutions especially are really, a way to bring water also to biodiversity people, but also to highlight this is the climate that you are going to work with now, from now on. You have higher precipitations or more unpredictable weather patterns. You will have flooding, you might have droughts. How can you, adapt to it and also, in a way, mitigate it? Because nature-based solutions can be also a solution for mitigation, while also providing benefits for biodiversity and helping to solve those issues that you are facing now or that you will face. So I see a lot of common points in the way that raising up the profile of water issues sort of carries everything with it, because water is everywhere, water is in everything. So it's not just raising our own bubble. And I remember that Mrs. Van Ginneken told about, do we want to stay in our water bubble, or do we want to branch out and talk to other actors from the economic sectors, from energy, which is, you cannot dissociate from water issues. So it's great to see that we are having already those solutions, and that by water coming up on the agenda, on the international agenda, we are sort of raising the profile of everything. And so on to talk about where we're going now, because the title of the session is about global water governance. After this UN conference in 2023, what's next? So I want to ask you all very briefly, in a few sentences maybe, before we go on to ask questions to the audience. For you, either for your organization or for you, how you see the future of global water governance, what's next? And maybe we can start with Mrs. Spiteri.
So what's next? Again, different case. The short term, what's next for us is very much, we will organize a conference for all these international waters, the portfolio in less than a month. That's very much the place for the knowledge exchange, etc., that we believe it's a very important ingredient moving forward. In the medium term, I think what's next for Jeff especially might be also interesting, linking to what you just mentioned. So also moving towards more integrated programming. So we're not, the programming at Jeff's no longer, for instance, looking at international waters focal areas, but bridging other focal areas, biodiversity, climate change, and what is next, coming up next year and so on. There are 11 such integrated programs, big programs, and one of them, it's called Clean and Healthy Oceans, and very much looking at nutrient discharges from agriculture, from municipality sources, etc., and what that means in terms of deoxygenation downstream in marine systems. So that's coming up, and it's a very big program with a global component and a number of national such projects. What's next in the long term? I think we have already touched upon this. We see that, already we make some progress, some efforts to have water reflected, for example, in the UN Ocean Conference and other way around, linking to biodiversity. The flirting, I think, was the right word. I think I cannot say what's next, but maybe wishfully thinking what could be next is if this multilateral environmental agreements, the real integration with them, it's kind of done systematically and not just add-ons as we go along. And I think that would be a nice opportunity for the next UN Water Conference to tackle it in that way in the design phase already. So just...
Thank you. What about you?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, there is a colleague of mine, and I want to quote him. He said, "Look, that gravity is on our side." Now, of course, we have to land on our feet, okay, right? But I think in the immediate, and really, I'm a firm believer in like taking little steps one at a time. So we absolutely need to make sure that the 2026 conference is a success, and it really charts a way forward towards 2028. And then we, as UN system, have to really be there to support member states, to take the decisions we need to take. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And finally, for the US EPA, what's next?
So I'd like to go back to our keynote speaker and say, the question she poses whether we need water governance or whether we should have water ambassadors. And I'm going to say, well, maybe it's both. You mentioned, the long run, and I think that was a brilliant statement about, that in the long run we can do this. But today we need those ambassadors. We need them out, both spreading the word and continuing to elevate the process of showing the importance of water in our world. Some people, it's easy to understand. Others take it for granted. We still need to spread the word. We still need to build those connections that I think are easy to talk about, but really take an investment of time. So in the short run, I think we're going to be water ambassadors that establish connections, find common problems, and think about unique solutions and working together to do that. And that's exciting to me. I think, of course, making the conference a success is important. And I think if we're building those bridges and connections, we will make it a success. In some respects, that's kind of laying the groundwork for a successful conference. And then in the long run, talking about establishing that more, I think you said systematic process, which I think is really the right thing to do. And all the while, we'll all be working on our individual projects. I know at EPA we've been working pretty hard because an issue that I think is cropping up worldwide has become very evident to us, and that is perfluorinated compounds and PFAS regulation. So we're going to continue to take a holistic look at how to address that. And at the same time, we have a system of delivering water that has lead pipes associated with it, which is totally unacceptable in our country. So we're working to ensure that we remove all of our lead service lines in our country, 100% of them, in 10 years, which is a big lift since we have 9 million of them across the nation. But we'll work on these individual issues, but we're going to get back together in situations like this and hopefully reach out through the connections we've made here to be water ambassadors, externally facing, and then internally to get ideas for dealing with stuff like Gulf hypoxia or the hypoxia in the Baltic. And I'm very excited to get started working with all of you.
That's great. Thank you so much to all the three of you. And what I really take back from this panel is the need for connection across sectors, across borders, across also people that we meet here. So if you want to exchange cards after this, it's really the place to do it, but also the need for action. Once you have those connections and this framework that we have, I mean, global water governance is to have action on the ground and find solutions that work, if not for everyone, because it's not one size fits all. The importance of local context cannot be overstated, but to find ways to, transform those connections into action and transform them into something that we can all be proud of. And I think the World Water Week is a great place to make those connections and to keep working on those afterwards. So thank you very much to all of you. I want now to turn to the audience for a couple of questions. We have a mic here, and our colleague from CIWI will be able to pass it around if someone wants to ask a question. I see hands over there on my left side. So we have about 10 minutes for audience questions.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Hello. Hi, thank you so much. Really wonderful presentation and discussion. So as water ambassadors, we often have to talk with others who aren't experts in this field. And regarding climate change, it's really easy for people to conceptualize how it relates to energy, but it's a little bit more difficult to understand how climate change directly impacts water quality. So I was wondering if you could provide a way to discuss that to others in a kind of an elevator snippet pitch.
It's so hard. I mean, communicating many of our issues is hard. And here's the thing I find about it. It's a process you improve on every day, and sometimes you fail on it. So it's hard to develop that elevator pitch. One of the ways I talk about it is in context. And I know big cities all across the world have these sewer systems that were developed years ago, and they purposely overflowed when it rains too hard because the community didn't have a big enough treatment facility, or it wasn't sophisticated enough. And we're all dealing with it. Paris dealt with it for the Olympics. I know Stockholm has been dealing with it. All across the United States, we've been dealing with it. And one of the ways that I think that I talk about it is these rain events, and we've all experienced them, where we've seen torrential downpours for very short periods of time in unpredictable lengths, mean that we're overloading our sewer systems, and that means raw sewage is getting in our water, and it's happening more frequently than ever before. So if we tackle those issues, build resilience into our system, then we also help and we adopt climate-friendly green infrastructure practices. We help prevent that stuff from happening and adapt to these changing circumstances we're dealing with. That's more than an elevator speech. It's the best I could do right now, though.
Another answer on that question. I also want to highlight that water is a topic of discussion only when it's a problem. So if you're used to going home and turning on the tap and clear water comes out, you will not ask those questions. You will not consider how much energy goes into pumping that water into you, how much expertise is needed to make sure it's clean for consumption. But as soon as there is an issue where you have poor quality or not enough water or too much water, people start, considering, wait, where is this coming from? Who is dealing with this, and who is responsible for it not being the quality that I like? And so when you said gravity is on our side, climate change is working for us on that thing, that water is going to become much more of a topic, even in countries where it didn't used to be a problem. So yeah, lots of discussions are coming.
The one other thing, I think you have that conversation's different in different places too. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you go to the western United States, where the groundwater's drying up, where the water from the Rio Grande, where the water from the Colorado is going away, it's easy to make that speech, right? Because of the increasing temperatures and because of the use of the water, our water's disappearing. There's a direct connection that I think that anybody in the West of the United States can see. And maybe that conversation differs depending on the location you're in and who you're talking to.
I'm sorry to interrupt, because I completely agree, but I want to take a couple more questions from the audience. So yes?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to come back to make a question regarding do we need governance? Because it reminds me the question we had when we built the 2030 agenda, and where people were saying, do we really need to have an SDG on water? And many people were saying, no, we don't, because water is everywhere. Is there someone in the room who is ready to abandon the SDG 6 today? No. Why? Because it brings visibility to the sector and it brings funds. So I think that the question, do we need governance? For me, it's a little a spoiled child question. Yes, we need governance. We need it very long, and we need it further than 2028. It would be my first point. The second question, do we need to be in our bubble? Me, I'm coming from the humanitarian side, and I appreciate the points that you made on that. We still need to remember that 1/4 of the planet doesn't have access to safe water, and nearly half of the planet doesn't have sanitation. So indeed, we need to be integrated. I'm coming from Action Against Hunger, so we are really integrated, but we need the priorities, the health priority connected to the lack of access to water and sanitation. So let's not dilute ourselves too much, and let's keep in mind the track of the 2030 agenda. So my synthesis would say, we want the conference to go beyond 2028. We want also to implement a nexus. We want the conference to embrace the humanitarian side, the 165 million people who are really, it's a matter of death or life to have access to water for those people. We don't want to exclude them from the conference. And of course, after we can enter also in the debate of integration, which is fundamental. But just to come back to the basics. Thank you.
We can clap. We can definitely clap. You should have been part of the panel. So yes, we just have time for one very quick question.
Yes, I totally agree with this person. Because we talk about global water governance, I think we need it. It may look very different now. And I think that's because multilateralism is looking very different now, with more importance to local deliberative processes playing a role. So I think before at the global level decisions and agendas and norms were made, I think after COVID especially, and with many global challenges, we realized there's a local need. And I don't think that's unique to water. It's also climate change, right? A lot of local communities are saying, well, climate is also a local issue. Biodiversity is also a local issue. But I do think there is a need for water specifically. I wanted to ask the panel, so for the UN, when the UN Water is doing a system-wide strategy and they're trying to mainstream water, my fear is that if you even work on the field and with the national governments, what you find is, as a water person, you're either working with the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Irrigation, but then they don't cover other aspects of water. And you actually end up with a jurisdictional gap. So you touch multiple aspects of water, and then there's one aspect of water that no ministry deals with, and then someone has to take on that responsibility, but it's not in their legal mandate or it's not within their budget. And so one of the challenges with the mainstreaming idea, if you try to fit water in other sectors, then you don't get a comprehensive picture of water. And this happens not just at the global level, it's happening at the local, national, regional levels. And so my question with the UN especially is there, and I know there's a big problem with the UN because the UN water is not a department, it's a coordination mechanism. And I think that's a huge challenge because water touches too many things and there are too many gaps that still continue to remain in this day and age.
So, sorry, what's the question?
So my question is that going to change? There's a need, is that going to change? Sorry.
No, thank you for that. Actually, I would like to bring in an example from Canada. Okay, so in Canada, there are basically 24 different parts of the government which have a mandate on water. Okay, for good reasons, of course. How can agriculture not talk about water? How can health not talk about water? So the same, of course, happens in the UN system for very good reasons. Every part of the UN system needs to talk about water and sanitation. Now, what we did in Canada, they created the Canada Water Agency, right, to coordinate this. So basically, you can think in a very little different way that UN Water is the equivalent of that. And I think we will get there. But at the country level, so our theory of change for the strategy at the country level is that we're working very much hand in hand with the UN resident coordinator system. So a few years ago, there was huge reform of the country level coordination, and now we have in every country UN resident coordinators who are responsible for coordinating. So the first step of a process at country level is actually doing what's called a common country analysis. So we want, and we will be there to provide input, intellectual input into the common country analysis. That translates into an agreed framework between the host government and the UN system, which is called the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Frameworks. That translates into action. So this is our theory of change, and by doing this, we are bringing together all sectors that need to be there.
What about gaps?
We can talk after the meeting.
Thank you. Any other
Well,
reactions?
I think that coordination aspect is true. Whenever you, and you're right. I mean, I find that in the United States, you could have said United States, you could have said Canada. Any government entity has these different, and they have all good reasons for establishing different departments, but they have tentacles that work their way into water. So in the United States, there's something that we call the Council on Environmental Quality, and that has that same kind of function, which is to provide some sort of coordination on environmental issues. But that organization is tasked with all environmental issues, so it's not even water specific. I think it's a challenge. I think that's a very big challenge you've issued, and I think it's a good one. And we need to think about it. But coordination's part of it, for sure, that answer. But it's a lot tougher than it seems that it would be. Governance is difficult.
Those could be the closing words. Governance is very difficult. But these are not the closing words, because I'm very pleased to first thank our great panelists. I think you deserve a round of applause. And I will ask you to return to your seats in the audience. And of course, you can meet them after the session. But I will like to invite Mrs. Barbara Pompili, the Special Envoy to the President of the French Republic, for the One Water Summit. So we talked a lot about integration. We talked about collaboration. We talked about what the future of water can look like. And to me, the future of water will be happening at the One Water Summit. So it is my pleasure to welcome you on stage for the closing statements.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you for accepting this invitation from the Office Français for the Biodiversity and for sharing your views on the next steps for a stronger, sustainable, peaceful water governance. Today, I'm delighted because we commonly see that this 2023 Water Conference was a success, and was a success, of course, thanks to the efforts of the Tajikistan and the Netherlands, but also with the efforts of all of us and the United Nations. Because they have, and it was very important, and we heard the panelists saying that during this session, it raised the awareness of the issue on water. And I think it's the first step. It is a so important first step. We emerge from the conference with 4 clear priorities, and we are already delivering results. Firstly, the priority of strengthening water coordination within the UN. You stressed it well. We welcomed in July the first ever UN system-wide strategy for water and sanitation for better coordination among UN entities and collective efforts to support countries more effectively in achieving SDG 6. It's the first things, and it's very important, and especially on WASH, and you underlined that WASH was, we had to have WASH in mind, even if we think about cross-cutting issues. Secondly, 150 countries have called for the appointment of a UN special envoy for water, although not yet appointed, but he or she will have a very important role in raising the profile of water. This role is clear, it's identified, and it will take a great place in this new UN-wide strategy. Thirdly, we saw this year that water is way better integrated into multilateral process. We saw it at Climate COP 28 and at the UN Environment Assembly. We saw the high-level profiles and discussions at the Bali World Water Forum. We see all sectors are represented here in Stockholm. We should continue to make water visible and addressed at the UN General Assembly, at Biodiversity COP 16, at Climate COP 29, at Desertification COP 16, and so on and so forth. And fourthly, the states have recognized the importance of a regular intergovernmental dialogue on water and have agreed on the organization of the two future UN conferences in 2026 and 2038. I would like to salute the commitment of the United Arab Emirates and Senegal in organizing the next conference. We are asked today, what are the next steps for the water governance agenda? We had very fruitful and interesting discussion on this aspect, and I think the global objectives set at the 2023 conference and the next deadline are already clear. What we still miss is the implementation of the water action agenda everywhere and at all levels. Because as it was said, water challenges are everywhere in the context of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. These challenges remind us that access to water is insufficient quantity and quality in as much question of public health, food security, economic development, energy, gender equality, human rights, and peace and security. So we have that already. But what I'm not so delighted about today is the sometimes lacking high-level political will everywhere at all levels to create the framework necessary for strong results. We need all heads of state and government to sit down with all stakeholders and assess the national priorities facing water issues. That's why we need ambassadors. There was a lot of question of ambassadors. And I think we're right. It's the first step. We are in our water bubble, as Mike said. We are in our water bubble. For us, it's obvious. We know what we have to do. We know the challenges we are facing. But we have to mainstream it. Definitely we have to do it. And we have to do that at all, in each occasion. And we are a lot of ambassadors, but we need some actions, some more actions to do that. And that's why the One Water Summit is one step in this mobilization. It's a milestone, but it's not the only one. And we need to create this coalition. We need to a greater mobilization. We aim to bring together at the highest level on topics such as cooperation on transboundary water, innovations for water resilience, private sector involvement, preservation of freshwater ecosystem, access to water, and sanitation for all, which is the basis. I agree with you, but I think this basis has to be integrated in all the policy. The water has to be everywhere, and water and sanitation has to be everywhere. And we had a very interesting discussion on that with a fair water footprint. When you have companies which are using water in their process in some countries, they have to pay attention and to make sure that the water they use in counterpart, they have to think about how people in their neighborhood have access to sanitation. I think we have to think about the interaction we can build on these ideas. We hope that the One Water Summit will contribute to the global dynamic on water, and that the result of this summit will feed into the preparation for an ambitious 2026 conference. If we succeed at showing that all sectors can sit together and find solutions effective on the ground, beneficial to all, and strengthening the global agenda, we will have launched an official example that taking action is no longer an option, but an urgent and positive necessity. Because I'm sure if we share experiences, if we share data, as we talk a lot about data, as I agree with that too, because we need to have a global view of what we have and what we need in order to take the right decision. I'm sure we will have done a great move and a very important step for the future. We look forward to working with you all, and we thank the partners here for our collective actions in this regard. France remains at disposal to prepare the summit and all the future deadlines we have mentioned to carry the topic of water and at its right place. Thank you so much, and let's stay in touch together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there's anything we need to remember when leaving this session, I think, is we have to do as the great philosopher of our time advised. I'm talking about Bruce Lee, of course. We have to be like water, and we have to be slipping through the cracks. So we have to mainstream without diluting the things we want to say, and we have to be everywhere, just like water is everywhere. I hope this session provided value to you, and do not hesitate to reach out to me or to the participants who are still in the room. And I ask you that you become very effective in becoming like water. Thank you very much.